Hey, hands out of pockets. You got papers to be in this neighborhood?
I own this house. You need to step off my driveway now.
Look, drop the attitude before I put you in the van, amigo.
I'm a combat veteran. I don't answer to you people.
I don't care who you are. Turn around. You're detained.
Touch me again and you're going to regret it.
The rain in Seattle is not a monolith. It has moods, textures, and weights. On this particular Tuesday in November, it was a heavy industrial curtain that seemed to drag the sky down to the pavement, turning the exposed upper deck of the Ballard General Hospital parking structure into a slick gray landscape of reflection and shadow. It was 3:45 p.m., the witching hour of hospital logistics, where the day shift bleeds into the swing shift, and the exhaustion of 12 hours on the floor meets the caffeinated anxiety of those just clocking in. Kendrick Sanchez stood under the concrete overhang of the elevator vestibule, adjusting the collar of his security uniform. He was 42 years old, built like a retaining wall, with the kind of stillness that only comes from years of standing watch. He wasn't just a guard. He was the supervisor for Sector 4, a role he treated with the same meticulous gravity he had once applied to convoy logistics in the Korangal Valley. He checked his watch, a battered G-Shock that had survived 3 deployments. He was 3 minutes past his end-of-shift protocol, but he had lingered at the pediatric station. It was a specific bond he had formed over the last 6 years. There was a 7-year-old boy in room 412 named Leo currently waiting for a donor heart. Every Tuesday, Kendrick stopped by not to check badges, but to deliver a security briefing, to Leo, handing over a sticker that said Junior Officer. It was a small ritual invisible to the administration, but it was the thing that allowed Kendrick to unclench his jaw after dealing with combative psych intakes and parking disputes all day. Kendrick stepped out into the rain heading toward his truck parked in spot 304. It was a Ford F-150 older, kept meticulously clean despite the weather. Inside the cab on the passenger seat sat a Tupperware container of leftover lasagna his wife Maria had packed for him and a library book on landscape architecture he read during breaks. He was a man of quiet, structured ambition. He wanted to finish his degree. He wanted to get home. He wanted the dull ache in his lower back, a souvenir from a Humvee rollover in 2009, to subside. He didn't see the black SUV until it was already blocking his exit path. It was an unmarked Chevrolet Tahoe, idling with the predatory patience of a vehicle that knows it owns the road. Inside were Special Agents Bennett Whitaker and Roman Carver. They were attached to a regional fugitive task force currently operating on a thin, stale tip about a check fraud ring suspected to be moving through the Pacific Northwest. The suspect profile was frustratingly broad. Latino male 40s, heavy build, possibly working in facilities or maintenance. Bennett Whitaker, the driver, was a man who had spent 20 years letting the badge erode his capacity for empathy. He viewed the world through a filter of confirmation bias. Everyone was guilty of something, it was just a matter of finding the statute. Roman Carver, in the passenger seat, was 10 years younger, a man who mistook aggression for competence and followed Whitaker's lead like a religion. "That's the build," Whitaker said, his voice low, cutting through the hum of the defroster. He watched Kendrick unlock the door of the F-150. "Blue rain jacket. Matches the description from the bank surveillance. He's wearing a uniform underneath," Carver noted, wiping a patch of condensation from the window. "Looks like security." "Perfect cover," Whitaker scoffed. "These guys love to hide in plain sight. Get a low-level job access to employee records, steal identities. Let's bag him before he gets mobile." Kendrick had just opened his driver's side door when the Tahoe lurched forward, cutting across the diagonal lines of the parking spaces and screeching to a halt 3 feet from Kendrick's bumper. The aggressive maneuver forced Kendrick to step back, trapped between his open door and the concrete pillar behind him. The somatic response was instantaneous. Before his conscious mind registered law enforcement, Kendrick's body registered threat. His heart rate spiked not in panic, but in preparation. The adrenaline dumped into his system, making his fingertips tingle. He didn't reach for a weapon, he didn't carry one, but his hands came up automatically to chest-height palms. Opened the universal gesture of de-escalation he had used 1,000 times in the ER waiting room. "Hey, step away from the vehicle," Whitaker bellowed as he kicked his door open. He didn't identify himself. He just projected force. Kendrick stood his ground. He couldn't leave even if he wanted to. The SUV blocked his forward path, the pillar blocked his retreat, and running would be a death sentence. He knew the running tax, the assumption of guilt that came with flight. "I'm the security supervisor here," Kendrick said, his voice steady but tight. He fought to keep the tremor out of his hands. "Can I help you?" I said, "Step away from the truck." Carver joined in, flanking to the left hand, resting ominously near his waistband. "Hands where we can see them." "My hands are visible." Kendrick said, speaking slowly, enunciating every syllable to cut through the noise of the rain. I am standing still. Who are you? Federal agents. Whitaker snapped, closing the distance. He was in Kendrick's personal space, now close enough that Kendrick could smell the stale coffee on his breath. We have a warrant for a subject matching your description. You need to identify yourself right now. I have my hospital ID on a lanyard, Kendrick said, moving his head slightly to indicate the plastic card hanging around his neck, currently tucked partially under his rain jacket. And my wallet is in my back right pocket. I am going to reach for my ID. Is that clear? Don't you reach for a damn thing, Whitaker hissed. This was the first micro-turn the moment the interaction shifted from an inquiry to an assault. You need to verify who I am, Kendrick said, the frustration beginning to burn in his chest. I work here? I've worked here for 6 years. I don't care if you're the Surgeon General, Whitaker said, his tone dripping with a specific coded dismissal. You fit the description. Facilities guy, big guy, hiding out in a parking garage. I am not hiding out, Kendrick replied, his voice hardening. I am going home to my family. You are blocking my vehicle. Attitude, Carver muttered, stepping closer. He's got an attitude, Bennett. It was the Gaslight SF2, rebranding a man's defense of his own dignity as attitude. Down the row of cars, Mrs. Gable was loading groceries into the trunk of her sedan. She was 70 years old, visiting her husband in post-op. The rain was heavy, blurring her vision. She saw 2 men in tactical gear shouting at a man in a dark jacket. She saw the man in the jacket tense up. Oh my God, she whispered, fumbling for her phone. They're fighting. This was the imperfection that almost cost Kendrick everything. Mrs. Gable didn't call the hospital security line. She called 911. There's a man fighting with police in the garage, she told the operator. That call went to Seattle PD dispatch, framing Kendrick as the aggressor before a single squad car was even rolling. Back at the truck, Whitaker had decided he was done talking. He reached out and grabbed Kendrick's left wrist hard. It was a violation of every protocol Kendrick knew. You don't put hands on a subject unless there is an immediate threat or an arrest is being effected. Kendrick's combat training flared. He didn't strike back, but he didn't go limp. He jerked his wrist down and away, breaking the grip with a sharp, controlled movement. Do not touch me, Kendrick warned, his voice low and dangerous. I have not consented to a search, and I am not under arrest. You are assaulting me. That's it, Carver shouted. Resisting? He's resisting? Whitaker lunged. He slammed Kendrick against the side of the F-150. The sound of Kendrick's body hitting the metal was sickeningly loud, a dull thud that echoed off the concrete ceiling. Kendrick's face was pressed against the cold, wet glass of his own window. He could see the library book on the seat inside, a reminder of the civilized world he was being ripped away from. Stop fighting. Whitaker screamed, though Kendrick wasn't fighting. He was bracing. He had locked his arms and legs, making himself a statue. He knew that if he swung, if he pushed, if he did anything other than exist, they would hurt him, maybe kill him. I am a U.S. Army veteran, Kendrick shouted, his mouth mashed against the glass. Check my ID, it's in my pocket, check it. Shut up. Whitaker ground his forearm into the back of Kendrick's neck. This was the dual viral Spark DV1. It wasn't just that they were arresting him, it was that they were actively refusing to look at the evidence that would exonerate him. Whitaker had Kendrick's wallet within reach. He could have pulled it out. He could have looked at the driver's license, the military retiree card, the hospital supervisor badge, but he didn't. To look would be to admit the possibility of error. To look would be to treat Kendrick as a credible source of information. Whitaker refused. He chose the narrative over the truth. But the garage wasn't empty. The shift change was peaking. Dr. Elias Thorne, the chief of surgery, was walking to his car in Bay 302. He was tired, looking forward to a scotch and a silent house. He heard the slam. He saw the struggle. He stopped. He squinted through his wire-rimmed glasses. He knew that truck. He knew the man pinned against it. Kendrick had walked Dr. Thorne to his car 3 nights ago when a disgruntled family member was loitering in the lobby. Kendrick. Dr. Thorne said, his voice cutting through the rain. He didn't hesitate. He dropped his briefcase. Hey, Dr. Thorne shouted, stepping off the curb and into the driving lane. What the hell are you doing? Whitaker spun his head around, wild-eyed. Federal agents, back off. This is an active arrest situation. That is my employee, Dr. Thorne barked. He wasn't a big man, but he was a man used to giving orders that determined life and death. He walked straight toward the SUV. That is the security supervisor of this hospital. You get your hands off him? Sir, step back or you will be detained for obstruction, Carver yelled, pointing a finger at the surgeon. I'm not stepping anywhere, Thorne said, planting his feet. You are making a mistake. A massive mistake. The commotion drew others. A group of 3 nurses from the ICU walking together for safety stopped. They saw Dr. Thorne. They saw Kendrick. Is that Kendrick? One of them asked. They're hurting him, another cried out. They didn't run away. They moved in. It was the Solidarity engine SE-01 firing to life. They didn't attack the agents. They didn't scream obscenities. They just formed a perimeter, a semicircle of scrubs in white coats standing 10 feet back witnessing. Whitaker looked at them. He looked at the phones coming out. He realized with a sinking feeling in his gut that the isolation he needed was gone. Get him in the car, Whitaker snarled to Carver. Now, before this turns into a riot. I'm not going in the car, Kendrick yelled, struggling to keep his footing on the slick pavement. I demand a supervisor. I demand local police. You're going to jail, Whitaker shoved him, and then the cavalry arrived. But it wasn't the police yet. It was Mrs. Halloway. Jean Halloway, the director of hospital operations, had been leaving the administrative wing when she got a text from Thorne Parking L3, Fed's assaulting staff. Need you. She arrived in her heels, ignoring the puddles, her face set in a mask of administrative fury. She walked right past the nurses, right past Dr. Thorne, and stood 5 feet from Whitaker. Stop, Halloway commanded. She didn't shout. She projected. It was the voice she used to silence a boardroom. I am the director of this facility. You are on private property. Release my staff member immediately. Lady, stay out of this, Whitaker warned, sweating now despite the cold. He's a fugitive. He is not a fugitive, Halloway said, her voice dripping with ice. He is a decorated veteran who has been on shift for the last 8 hours. We have digital logs. We have cameras. You are currently assaulting him. We have a warrant, Carver tried to interject. For who? Halloway demanded. Show me the warrant. Show me the name. Whitaker hesitated. We don't have to show you anything. Then you are trespassing, Halloway said. She pulled out her phone. I am on the line with our general counsel. I have also flagged a priority 1 distress call to Seattle PD. They are 2 minutes out. If you put him in that car, we will be filing kidnapping charges. The word kidnapping hung in the air. This was the freeze moment. Whitaker had Kendrick cuffed, now hands behind his back. Kendrick was breathing hard, his chest heaving against the wet metal of his truck. He looked up, rain dripping from his eyelashes, and locked eyes with Halloway. He didn't look scared anymore. He looked resolved. My ID, Kendrick said, his voice raspy. It's in my back pocket. Just look at it. Whitaker stood there, the cuffs slick in his hands. The circle of witnesses was tight. Dr. Thorne was recording. The nurses were recording. Halloway was on the phone with a lawyer. Reluctantly, furiously, Carver reached into Kendrick's pocket. He pulled out the wallet. He flipped it open. He stared at it. He looked at the photo. He looked at the name. Kendrick James Sanchez. He looked at the military retiree card. Rank SSG, status retired. Carver looked at Whitaker. He didn't say a word. He just swallowed hard. It's not him, is it? Dr. Thorne asked, his voice cutting like a scalpel. We have to verify. Whitaker stammered, his arrogance evaporating into a desperate need to cover his tracks. The description, he resisted. That's a separate charge. He didn't resist, said a voice from the side. It was Officer Davis, a junior security guard who had run up the stairs. He was panting, but he was standing tall. He tapped the black plastic rectangle on his chest. I've been recording since I opened the stairwell door, Davis said. I have audio and video. He identified himself 3 times. You told him you didn't care. This was the first anchor category, A3, the Bodycam. Plainly spoken, undeniably present. It wasn't a magical device. It was a witness that couldn't be intimidated. The sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. Seattle PD was coming up the ramp. When the SPD sergeant arrived, the dynamic shifted instantly. Sergeant Miller knew Kendrick. They had coordinated on gang intake protocols just last month. Miller took one look at Kendrick in cuffs, then looked at the 2 federal agents looking increasingly small next to their massive SUV. Uncuff him, Miller said. It wasn't a request. We have jurisdiction. Whitaker tried, but it was weak. Not to assault my citizens, you don't, Miller said. And definitely not to assault a hospital supervisor on private property without a confirmed ID. Uncuff him. Now. Carver unlocked the cuffs. Kendrick rubbed his wrists, the red marks angry against his skin. He didn't rub them for sympathy. He rubbed them to get the circulation back. He turned to Whitaker. He didn't scream. He straightened his jacket. He fixed his collar. He picked up his dignity and put it back on like armor. You need to leave my facility, Kendrick said. "We're not done," Whitaker muttered, retreating to the SUV. "Oh, we are definitely not done," Holloway said, holding up her phone. "Legal wants your badge numbers and your supervisor's name. Now." The agents left. They drove down the ramp in silence, the rain swallowing their exit. But the story didn't end there. That was just the beginning of the receipt gathering. The hospital didn't just file a complaint. They mobilized. The second anchor category, B3, was the dispatch log. The agents had claimed in their initial rushed report that they had been tracking the suspect for 20 minutes in the garage. But the hospital's security dispatch logs showed Kendrick swiping into the secure perimeter of the NICU at 3:30 p.m. to give Leo his sticker. He physically could not have been the man they were tracking. The timeline was a lie. Kendrick was placed on administrative leave for 3 days, standard protocol for any physical altercation. He spent those 3 days sitting in his living room, staring at the wall, listening to cars drive by, his heart rate spiking every time a door slammed. The trauma wasn't physical. It was the violation of his sanctuary. He had built a life of order, and they had smashed it just to see if it would break. But the institution held. Mrs. Holloway and the hospital's legal team bypassed the local field office and went straight to the inspector general. They submitted the Bodycam footage. They submitted the affidavits from Dr. Thorne and the nurses. They submitted the logs. The payoff path PP6 was a slow grind. It took 18 months for the indictment to come down. The trial was held in a federal district court. Whitaker and Carver hired expensive lawyers who tried to argue qualified immunity and heat of the moment. They tried to paint Kendrick as a combat-trained threat who postured aggressively. But the jury saw the video. They saw Kendrick standing still, hands visible, begging them to look at his ID. They heard Whitaker say, "I don't care," Dr. Thorne testified. "Mr. Sanchez showed more restraint in that parking lot than most men would show in a church," he told the jury. "He absorbed their violence so that we wouldn't have to treat gunshot wounds that night." The verdict was unanimous. Deprivation of rights under color of law, assault, falsification of records, 5 years. When the gavel came down, Kendrick didn't cheer. He sat in the back row wearing a suit that was slightly too tight across the shoulders. He looked at Whitaker, who was staring at the table, his face gray and slack. Kendrick walked out of the courthouse into the Seattle air. It was raining again, but this time he didn't mind. He walked to his truck, a new one now, and unlocked the door. He sat in the driver's seat and took a deep breath. He drove to the hospital. It was Tuesday. He had a shift to start, and somewhere on the 4th floor, a kid named Leo was waiting for his sticker. Kendrick parked his truck, checked his badge, and walked into the building. He was safe. He was home. This story demonstrates that while individual resilience is powerful, it is institutional solidarity that truly secures justice. First, notice that Kendrick's perfect behavior, staying calm, keeping hands visible, verbally de-escalating, did not stop the assault, but it created the undeniable evidence needed for the courtroom. Next, recognize the critical role of the witnesses. Dr. Thorne and the nurses did not physically fight the agents, which could have led to tragedy, but instead used their authority to freeze the scene and demand accountability. Furthermore, the immediate involvement of Leadership Director Holloway shifted the power dynamic from a street encounter to a legal standoff, preventing the agents from removing Kendrick from the site. Finally, always remember that in any interaction with law enforcement, your goal is survival in the moment and litigation later. Never attempt to win the argument on the side of the road. Silence and documentation are your strongest weapons. Some elements are selectively fictionalized for education.